The sun was rising over the endless plains of Texas, gently burning the horizon with golden light that bathed the cotton fields and dusty roads. The warm wind caressed the tall grasses and made the leaves of the trees quiver. In this tranquil setting, a young boy ran barefoot, his face turned toward the sky, his eyes shining with fascination. The air carried the scent of dry earth and gasoline, a familiar mix for those who lived near engines and farm machinery. This boy's name was Robert Harris. He was growing up on a small farm, among animals and machines, with a father who taught him the value of hard work, precision, and patience. From a very young age, he became passionate about engines and airplanes. The sky was not a mystery to him. It was a promise, a calling he would answer much later. He spent hours watching planes in the distance, imagining their paths, dreaming of touching the clouds, of feeling the wind on his face aboard these flying machines. He knew his life would not be spent walking along the dusty roads of Texas. He wanted to fly. Years passed, and the world around him changed rapidly. The Great Depression hit the United States hard, but Robert continued to dream. He helped his father repair engines and maintain tractors, learning to listen to the vibration of a motor, understand its rhythm, and anticipate its quirks. Every time he touched an engine, he felt a special, almost intimate connection. It was there that he learned patience, precision, but also courage, for a poorly maintained machine could be deadly. The newspapers spoke of Europe at war, of invaded countries, of bombed cities, and little by little, the war seemed to draw closer. Robert, young and observant, began to understand that this conflict would affect everyone sooner or later. When Pearl Harbor was attacked in December 1941, Robert was working in the family workshop, his hands black with grease. The news hit him like a shock. He dropped his wrench and felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement take hold of him. The war was no longer an abstraction. It had become a tangible reality. He didn't hesitate. He immediately enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces. The idea of piloting a fighter plane fascinated him. He wanted to take part in the struggle, fly in the sky, and contribute to freedom. The training was long, intense, and demanding. Robert learned to fly, read instruments, maneuver in all conditions, and shoot with precision. Every day was a lesson in courage and discipline. The P-51 Mustang, the plane he would soon fly, was not just a machine. It was an instrument of survival and freedom, capable of roaring over battlefields and protecting thousands of lives. Robert discovered Europe in 1944, a continent marked by decades of conflict and now torn apart by war. England welcomed him with its gray skies and incessant rains. The country was on constant alert. Sirens sometimes sounded in the middle of the night, and the ground vibrated under the passage of bombers. The intensity of the training and the palpable tension between pilots and mechanics made every moment precious. Robert spent hours checking every detail of his Mustang, studying maps, memorizing enemy positions and escape routes. Every decision could be a matter of life or death. Fear was always present, but it was controlled by discipline and passion for flying. The days leading up to June 6, 1944, were marked by a heavy, oppressive atmosphere of anticipation. On the air bases, the slightest sound heightened the tension: the engine of a plane, the rustle of maps, the sound of boots on wet concrete. Robert barely slept. Each night he watched the sky and wondered what would await him. His thoughts oscillated between excitement and apprehension. He questioned whether he was ready, whether his Mustang and he would be able to overcome the ordeal. The wind that struck the tent at night seemed to whisper warnings, and yet deep inside, he felt an unwavering determination. He knew that tomorrow everything would change. D-Day was approaching, and with it, one of the most daring military operations in history. The oceans, beaches, and cliffs of Normandy would soon bear witness to courage, fear, and sacrifice.
On June 6, 1944, dawn broke over a horizon heavy with low clouds, painting the sky in shades of gray-blue and pale pink, heralding the coming light of day. The sea, vast and impassive, faintly reflected the first rays, while thousands of ships pressed toward the beaches of Normandy. In this majestic and terrifying scene, the sky seemed both calm and charged with promise. Robert Harris, perched in the cockpit of his P-51 Mustang, felt every vibration of his plane. His heart beat in unison with the engine, his hands on the control stick, his eyes scanning the horizon for any suspicious movement. He thought of everything he had learned during his training, every maneuver repeated hundreds of times, every lesson etched into his memory. Fear was present, quiet but persistent, an invisible companion he tamed with discipline and focus. Clouds drifted slowly above the cliffs, sometimes offering shelter, sometimes setting traps for enemy fighters that had been patrolling these skies for weeks. Every second was an inner battle, a fragile balance between instinct and skill, between courage and caution. As Robert adjusted the stick and continued scanning the horizon, he spotted the silhouettes of B-17 and B-24 bombers advancing in formation, heavy and majestic, their wide wings seeming to trace a fragile line of protection across the vast sky. His mission was clear: escort these planes, protect their crews, and confront any enemy that dared approach. He felt his Mustang shiver under his hands, ready to lunge, dive, or climb as the fight demanded. The roar of the engine, the instruments softly blinking, and the violent wind against his helmet created a symphony of tension and focus. Suddenly, in the distance, dark shapes appeared on the horizon, approaching rapidly. Robert's brain processed every piece of information at lightning speed. Speed, altitude, direction, number, type of aircraft. Focke-Wulf FW-910's formidable German fighters moved in tight formation, fast and deadly. His breath quickened, his fingers tightened on the controls as fear and adrenaline merged. He recalled all the hours spent simulating combat, observing the movements of allied and enemy fighters, mentally rehearsing avoidance and firing strategies. Immersed in the cloud of tension, he thought briefly of his home in Texas, of the calm plains, of the scent of earth and engines. That memory was a surge of courage. He gritted his teeth, adjusted his trajectory, and mentally shouted, "You're going to protect these men, Mustang. This is our mission." The plane surged forward, diving into a tight turn to intercept the first FW-910 heading for a vulnerable bomber. Gunfire crackled, the cannon spat flames, and the enemy fighter broke away, smoking, plunging toward the sea. A mix of relief and tension rose within him. This was only one of many challenges this day would bring. Every minute in the sky felt like an eternity. Waves of enemy fighters followed one another, and every decision could determine the life or death of a crew. Robert adjusted his maneuvers with cold precision, alternating between moments of attack and evasion, using every cloud, every glint of light to surprise the enemy and protect his comrades. His thoughts constantly returned to his fellow pilots, to those who had fallen too soon, and to the crushing responsibility of those who survived. He knew that every partial victory was merely a single battle won in a larger, crueler war. Minutes stretched, hours seemed suspended in the Norman sky. Robert felt adrenaline become almost physical, his body reacting before his consciousness fully understood. The dust and smoke from explosions mingled with the smell of fuel and burning oil. Every maneuver was calculated, yet each second required instinct. The Mustang roared, leapt, and raced through the clouds like a predator ready to pounce on its prey. Memories of his youth in Texas, his first simulated flights, and long hours of training resonated in his mind like a reassuring and motivating mantra.
The sky over Normandy stretched endlessly, gray and heavy with low clouds, like a threatening blanket covering the beaches and cliffs. Waves crashed into white foam, striking the sands and obstacles left by the enemy. Robert Harris, perched in his P-51 Mustang, carefully watched every movement on the horizon, the engine vibrating beneath his hands, his breathing synced with the roar of the motor. He knew that every second could determine the life or death of the men below. The heavy bombers, lined up in tight formations, moved slowly toward their targets, vulnerable to enemy fighters. Robert adjusted his position, ready to intercept any threat, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Focke-Wulf FW-190s and Messerschmitt Me-109s, fast and deadly German fighters, were closing in. Every Allied pilot knew that the slightest mistake could be fatal. Robert felt a surge of adrenaline course through his veins, his hands gripping the controls tightly. Memories of his youth in Texas, the cotton fields, the warm wind on his face, brought a mixture of courage and nostalgia. He recalled the hours spent watching the sky, dreaming of flying, and now he was here, in the heart of battle. Every movement calculated, every breath measured, every glance scanning the horizon for the slightest sign of danger. The first shots rang out. Robert dived sharply to intercept an FW-190 charging at a bomber. The Mustang roared, its machine guns cracked, and the enemy fighter collapsed in a trail of smoke. Robert felt a wave of relief mingled with tension. This was only one of many challenges of the day. Hardly had he regained altitude when another enemy plane appeared from a cloud, and he dove again, narrowly avoiding fire and returning precise shots. The sky seemed like a living chessboard, every move calculated, yet unpredictable, every decision capable of changing the course of the battle. As the morning progressed, coordination with the bombers became crucial. Robert had to protect the B-17s and B-24s while monitoring the troops on the ground. Soldiers moved cautiously across the beaches and dunes, exposed to fire from German bunkers and heavy artillery. Robert could almost feel their fear and determination. He watched tanks advancing slowly, some immobilized by precise shots, others moving courageously despite shells exploding around them. Every move on the ground influenced his decisions in the sky. Every attack he intercepted could save lives. Every mistake could cost dozens of men. Time seemed to stretch and contract simultaneously. Minutes passed like hours. Robert, focused, felt fatigue weigh on his muscles, yet his mind remained alert. He analyzed every move of enemy planes, every turn, every trajectory, adjusting his maneuvers with millimetric precision. The radio crackled with urgent instructions, bomber reports, threat alerts. Every message demanded immediate reaction. Every sound required full attention. Several times, Robert faced close encounters with enemy fighters. An FW-190 appeared a few meters away, diving toward an Allied bomber. Robert dove in turn, firing calculated bursts, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. The plane shuddered under the power of the Mustang, but Robert did not succumb to fear. Each aerial duel was a mixture of fear, precision, and instinct. Every movement was vital. Every second could be the last. Sometimes the fighting subsided momentarily, offering relative respite, but a single lapse in attention was enough for the threat to return. Robert flew over the fields and roads of Normandy, observing troops and ships below. Explosions and smoke created a chaotic, almost surreal landscape where every detail could hide danger. He thought of his childhood in Texas, the cotton fields, the warm wind on his face, the dream of flying that had brought him here. These memories gave him the strength and focus needed to continue facing the enemy. Adrenaline surged again as he spotted enemy planes attacking ground forces. Robert dove and firing with precision to divert the fighters and protect the soldiers. Every maneuver required perfect coordination between instinct and experience, every turn, every acceleration, every calculated descent. Hours passed amid noise, smoke, fire, and relative silence. The Normandy landscapes unfolded like a mosaic of destruction and heroic deeds, where every detail could alter the fate of dozens of lives. As the sun climbed higher, the battle continued, intense and unrelenting. Allied troops advanced slowly but steadily, despite losses and obstacles. The bombers pressed forward, escorted by pilots like Robert, whose every action helped secure their passage. Coordination between sky and ground was a fragile yet essential balance. Robert felt fatigue, but it was overshadowed by focus and the necessity of protecting those who relied on him. Every shot, every dodge, every decision was crucial. Every moment reinforced the awareness that he was at the heart of history, both witness and participant in an event that would change the course of the war. The Mustang cut through the air, leaping between clouds, bursts, and explosions. Robert alternated between cold concentration and intimate thoughts. Fear, courage, nostalgia for Texas, hope for the troops on the ground. The aerial battle was not just a test of skill, it was a test of human resilience, courage, and determination. Every enemy attack, every moment of uncertainty, every successful or failed maneuver shaped the experience of this young pilot who, despite his age, was living the most intense and decisive moments of his life.
As the sun continued to climb above the Normandy coast, the aerial battle intensified. The P-51 Mustangs, flying in tight formation, moved with calculated precision, escorting the bombers slowly advancing toward their objectives. Robert Harris, perched in his cockpit, felt every vibration of the aircraft, every subtle change in pressure, every breath of wind against the wings. The sky seemed both vast and oppressive, filled with invisible dangers and opportunities for those who could maintain focus. Every minute in the air was a mix of fear and adrenaline, every decision potentially determining the fate of dozens of men on the ground and in the air. The low, heavy clouds, saturated with moisture, sometimes formed perfect cover for enemy fighters. Robert knew that one miscalculated move could place him directly in the line of fire of an FW-190 or MMA-109. His eyes scanned the horizon, his hands constantly adjusting the stick, his mind calculating the trajectories of both friendly and enemy aircraft. The Mustang roared, leaping through tight turns and rapid dives, each maneuver demanding precision and composure. He recalled the hours spent simulating combat at the American bases, mentally rehearsing every shooting technique and evasive strategy. All of it was now coming to life in the Norman sky, brutally and immediately. Several times, Robert intercepted enemy fighters attempting to approach the bombers. He dove, fired, dodged incoming shots, and spiraled upward, the Mustang responding to every impulse like an extension of his own body. Adrenaline surged, but every movement remained precise and methodical. He thought of the soldiers on the beach, the bombers relying on him, and the comrades lost on previous missions. Fear was there, quiet but controlled, transformed into vigilance and determination. Each attack triggered a complex ballet. Enemy planes often appeared in ambush, emerging from clouds or blind spots, while the Mustangs responded as a squadron, protecting the bombers and repelling threats. Robert felt the Mustang vibrate under the power of its engines and the tension of combat. Smoke from gunfire and distant explosions added a surreal quality to the scene. The sky was both a battlefield and a theater of survival, each maneuver a wager between life and death. Radio communications were constant, sometimes broken by interference or the panic of pilots in distress. Robert listened carefully, reacted swiftly, and coordinated his maneuvers with his comrades. Every word transmitted could save a life or cost another. He thought of his Mustang, his formation, the precision required to protect the bombers, and all he had learned on American bases and training flights. All of it was now coming to life in the Norman sky, brutally and immediately. As the day progressed, new waves of enemy fighters appeared, more aggressive and unpredictable. Robert found himself in several close duels, diving and turning at full speed, evading enemy fire and returning precise shots. Every movement required extreme anticipation. Every decision was a matter of life or death. Clouds and smoke sometimes offered a brief respite, sometimes a deadly trap. Robert recalled his instructor's advice, the discipline of training, and transformed fear into action, tension into precision.
Flying over the beaches and hills, he also observed the troops on the ground, advancing under fire, exposed to enemy guns. Allied tanks moved slowly, some immobilized by precise shots, others continuing despite explosions and flames. Robert understood the direct impact of every maneuver in the sky on the men below. Every enemy plane destroyed, every threat neutralized, contributed to the survival of those fighting on the sand and in the trenches. The day was long and exhausting, but Robert remained focused. His Mustang leapt through the clouds, his hands constantly adjusting the stick, his eyes tracking enemy and allied trajectories. He remembered his native Texas, the vast plains, the warm breeze, and that freedom that had always drawn him to the sky. These memories were an anchor amid chaos, giving him courage and clarity. Every attack, every dodge, every burst of fire became a dance between survival and duty, between instinct and strategic calculation. As the afternoon approached, Robert faced a particularly aggressive squadron. Tension rose, clouds darkened, and the sky filled with smoke and dust. The fighting grew tighter, faster, more unpredictable. Mustangs, bombers, and enemy fighters interwove in a complex ballet, each movement potentially decisive. Robert felt his heart racing, yet his actions remained precise. Adrenaline, fear, concentration, and courage merged into an intense, total experience. The Mustang lunged one last time, evading fire, protecting a struggling bomber, and Robert felt a mixture of fatigue and satisfaction. He knew the day was not over, that more fights awaited, that every moment in the sky could be decisive, yet he allowed himself a breath, observing the waves and beaches below, the advancing soldiers, realizing the magnitude of the mission. Every second in this Normandy sky marked his life and that of those he protected. As the sun began to descend toward the horizon, Robert Harris knew that this day would be etched in his memory forever. The Normandy sky had been both a battlefield, a theater of survival, and a place where discipline, courage, and determination intertwined at every moment. Every fight, every decision, every action reinforced the vital role he played in this historic operation. And as the Mustang raced toward the western sky, Robert prepared mentally for the days ahead, aware that the war continued, relentless, and that every moment would be a test of courage and resolve. The afternoon light gradually faded over Normandy, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, but the war did not slow. The Mustangs continued slicing through the clouds, scanning the horizon for the last German fighters and strategic points on the ground. Robert Harris, still at the controls of his P-51, felt the accumulated fatigue of the morning, yet his mind remained focused. Every movement, every decision could still save lives or cost the lives of his comrades. The wind whistled against his helmet, the instruments vibrated, and the sky became a labyrinth of dangers and markers, both familiar and unpredictable. As Robert flew over hills and forests, he noticed flashes of smoke from German resistance points. Isolated troops and vehicles attempted to counter the Allied advance, exposed to bomber fire and aerial cover. The Mustang leapt from one altitude to another, sometimes diving to inspect enemy positions, avoiding anti-aircraft fire that sliced through the air with ominous whistles. Every move demanded vigilance, anticipation, and composure. Robert felt the tension in every fiber of his being, but he knew that the discipline and experience he had accumulated were his best weapons. Reconnaissance missions were particularly perilous. Pilots had to fly over occupied zones, observe and transmit crucial information, while remaining exposed to enemy fire. Robert observed the lines of defense, enemy concentration points, and command structures hidden in the woods. He noted every detail mentally, aware that his observations would guide future attacks and protect the troops on the ground. The sky became a giant chessboard where every decision could have immediate and decisive consequences. Throughout the afternoon, new waves of German fighters appeared sporadically. Robert found himself in several close engagements, diving, turning, shooting, and evading with precision. Every aerial duel tested speed, strategy, and courage. He felt adrenaline coursing through his veins, but also fear, ever present, reminding him of the fragility of his life and those he protected. Yet within this turmoil, he found a form of clarity. Total action and focus erased fear, leaving only the purity of flying and the precision of maneuvers. As the sun continued its descent, the sky transformed into a dramatic tableau, blending smoke, clouds, and flashes of explosions. The Mustangs pursued enemy fighters, escorted the remaining bombers, and protected the advancing troops on the beaches and hills. Robert constantly adjusted his altitude, speed, and trajectories, using every cloud and reflection of light as cover or a strategic advantage. Seconds seemed to stretch, each moment both a threat and an opportunity. In a relative moment of respite, Robert became aware of the complexity of the day. Every soldier on the ground, every plane in the sky, every shot fired represented a fragile thread in the intricate web of the operation. He thought of his fallen comrades, of silent sacrifices, and the precise coordination between the various elements of the mission. Every aerial victory, every avoided attack, every successful maneuver contributed to the survival and progress of the Allied forces. War was not merely a physical confrontation, it was a test of resilience, judgment, and courage. As afternoon gave way to dusk, Robert flew over the remaining enemy positions, observing residual movements and anticipating adversary reactions. The Mustangs formed a strategic aerial cover, pilots coordinating through radios, transmitting vital information, and adjusting attacks based on changes on the ground. Robert felt intense fatigue, but it was tempered by the awareness of the importance of every action. The responsibility to protect his comrades and complete his mission outweighed physical exhaustion. The sky darkened gradually, but vigilance never waned. Enemy planes, though fewer in number, remained dangerous and unpredictable. Robert focused on the final reconnaissance sweeps, monitoring strategic zones and protecting bombers making their last passes. Coordination with ground troops, tanks, and fellow pilots was essential to avoid unnecessary losses. Every moment was filled with tension, precision, and anticipation. As night approached, the Normandy sky transformed into a mixture of fading light, clouds, and smoke from the battles. Robert Harris in his Mustang reflected on the day gone by, the fights, the losses, the victories, and the direct impact of his actions. Fatigue was palpable, yet his determination remained intact. Every second spent in this sky, every shot fired, every maneuver executed, every decision made was part of a greater whole, a day that would remain forever etched in history and in his memory. As stars began to appear over the Norman sky, Robert knew that this first day of the landing had been a turning point. Sky and land had been bound together by courage, discipline, and sacrifice. Every moment lived, every action taken, every life affected formed a living chapter of this story. And as he guided his Mustang back to a temporary base, he knew the war would continue. The challenges ahead would be even fiercer, but every moment of this day would remain etched in his mind, a testament to courage, determination, and survival in the skies over Normandy.
As the sun disappeared behind the Normandy horizon, the fading light painted the sky in shades of red and purple, tinting the clouds with dramatic colors. The sea reflected these hues faintly, creating a striking contrast with the chaos raging on the beaches. Robert Harris, still in his Mustang, carefully observed the expanse of land and the turbulent sea, aware that every moment, even in this dying light, could present danger. The accumulated fatigue of the day weighed on his shoulders, yet his mind remained sharp, every muscle, every reflex ready to react instantly. The relative calm of nightfall was deceptive. The flashes of shells on the beaches and hills formed alarming points of light, signaling the continued presence of the enemy. Robert adjusted his altitude, scanned for the slightest movement, and listened to the crackling of the radio. Urgent orders, information about enemy positions, and distress signals from the bombers came in succession, demanding constant attention. Every message required an immediate response. Every second became crucial for the survival of those on the ground. The night patrol mission demanded extreme vigilance. Robert had to identify enemy movements, protect the bombers, and monitor critical zones while avoiding collisions and anti-aircraft fire. The Mustang, though robust and agile, became a fragile tool in the darkness.
each maneuver amplified by tension and uncertainty. Robert felt his heart racing, but drew on the experience he had accumulated, discipline, and courage to maintain control. Above the beaches, the silhouettes of Allied troops grew increasingly indistinct as darkness deepened. Tanks and vehicles advanced slowly, their headlights creating brief glimmers in the gloom. Robert recalled every formation and position observed earlier in the day, anticipating movements to prevent any enemy attack. The sky seemed immense and unfathomable, filled with invisible dangers and zones of relative safety. Every moment was a combination of calculation, instinct, and pure courage. Suddenly, dark shapes appeared on the horizon, moving quickly through the darkness. German night fighters were attempting surprise attacks on isolated bombers and Allied troops. Robert reacted immediately, diving and firing with precision, evading enemy shots and protecting the more vulnerable aircraft. Adrenaline and total concentration blended into a symphony of tension and mastery. He felt every vibration of the Mustang, every breath of the engine, every quiver of the wings. The night sky had become a labyrinth where a single mistake could be fatal. In these moments of extreme tension, Robert recalled his native Texas, the long summer evenings spent gazing at the stars and dreaming of flying. These memories were an anchor amid the chaos of battle, a reminder that despite the violence and fear, there was purpose, a goal and meaning in everything he did. Every shot, every turn, every maneuver performed in the darkness had a direct impact on the survival of hundreds of men and the success of the Allied operation. Night missions were also a test of patience and perception. The Mustang's instruments were dimly lit, visual references scarce, and threats omnipresent. Robert had to use all his skills, quickly analyze information, and act with precision. The sounds of engines, the crackling of weapons, and the distant bursts of explosions formed an auditory landscape where every detail mattered. He focused, filtering the surrounding chaos to remain perfectly alert. As the night advanced, the fighting became more sporadic but no less unpredictable. Robert intercepted several enemy planes attempting to slip between Allied bombers and ground positions. Every close encounter required perfect timing, precise anticipation, and absolute composure. The Mustang leapt through the dark sky, its machine guns spitting fire into the night, every shot calculated to neutralize the threat without endangering allies. Robert's concentration and experience were tested like never before. On the ground, Allied troops continued their advance despite fatigue and danger. Robert knew that every aerial action could influence the success of these operations. The coordination between sky and land was fragile, but vital. Tanks moved cautiously, soldiers advanced meter by meter, risking their lives, and Robert, high in his Mustang, became a silent, invisible guardian angel. Every decision, every turn, every maneuver performed in the darkness had a direct impact on the survival of hundreds of men and the success of the Allied operation.